Several times now we've featured execution, executioners, and methods of execution on the channel. Regardless of whether you approve or disapprove of capital punishment, something has gone wrong somewhere along the line for a state or society to decide someone specific must be killed. Elephants, gas chambers, lethal injection, cannons, and drowning are all ways that criminals have met their end. Until now, we have neglected one of the most common. For most of human history, cultures all over the world used a simple and reliable method. Removing the head of the condemned was a fast and efficient method of execution. It was so common for so much of human history that we can't cover all of it in this episode. Today we are going to explore a brief history of decapitation as a method of execution. Decapitation in Antiquity. People have been cutting off each other's heads for so long that we don't know when it began. We know that it was happening at least 9,000 years ago. Archaeologists have found remains buried in Brazil from around that time. Removing the head usually happened after the victim died. For most cultures in the Americas, it appeared to be part of a religious ritual. Injured soldiers on the battlefield were not so lucky. They didn't experience the release of death before having their heads hacked off. Those who survived and became prisoners may live a little longer, but eventually they too were beheaded. Their heads would be processed and kept as a trophy rather than being buried respectfully. Cultures all over the world shared this practice for killing enemy combatants. Most didn't process the heads, but almost every culture displayed the severed heads as a trophy. Killing a person and displaying this gruesome trophy as a deterrent is a very ancient human practice. The Narmer Palette from Egypt provides the earliest written evidence of decapitation. Hieroglyphs on the palette show enemy soldiers being beheaded. These details were recorded over 5,000 years ago. However people felt about having their heads removed before recorded history, the ancient Greeks and Romans considered beheading to be an honorable death. When done correctly, it was fast and painless. Therefore, it became the preferred way to execute nobles. Roman citizens, for instance, could expect to be executed with a sword. A skilled handler of the weapon could sever a victim's head in a single blow. Those who weren't citizens could expect far more painful deaths. Crucifixion, boiling in oil, burning alive, and being killed by wild animals in the arena were all common options for the lower classes. But using a sword or axe to kill criminals would persist long after the empire ended. The Japanese were prone to behead criminals for even minor offenses. It was considered a disgraceful way to die unless it happened as part of a ritual seppuku. Samurai warriors who were required to meet their end by suicide would use a knife to disembowel themselves. Another samurai with a sword would stand by and, at the first sign of hesitation, would sever the head of his fellow warrior. When beheading another samurai, good manners required leaving the head connected by a small strip of skin. It was considered insulting to subject spectators to a rolling, bloody head. As with most methods of execution, it was only painless if the executioner was proficient. By the 16th century, those condemned to die in Europe found sloppy executions to be more the rule than the exception. One wonders how an executioner becomes proficient in beheading. In 1541, Margaret Pole was executed in England for conspiring against the king. She refused to accept that she was guilty and would not expose her neck for the executioner. Margaret was forcibly held down as he tried to sever her head with his axe. It took 11 blows before he succeeded. Unfortunately, this wasn't a problem that people were in a hurry to fix. In 1587, Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed for treason. As the executioner swung his axe down, the first blow missed her neck and struck her in the back of the head. She started groaning in pain. Another strike from the axe ended her life, but it took a third swing of the blade to remove her head. In the late 1700s, attitudes about beheading began to evolve. It was still a fine way to die, but there needed to be a more standardized way to carry out the sentence. Mechanical assistance. One way to ensure beheading was fast and effective was to create a device that can deliver killing blows more consistently than a human. The earliest example that we have for this type of machine was from England around 1210. It was called the Halifax Gibbet. It consisted of two tall wooden beams with a blade mounted between them. The blade was dropped from the top of the beams onto the neck of the condemned. When it worked, the victim was killed instantly. Scotland also had their own version of a beheading device called the Scottish Maiden. Italy had a variation used since Roman times known as the Italian Mannaia. These mechanical execution machines began to fall out of favor in the early 1700s for much of Europe. But the French would do their part to make it fashionable again. In 1789, French physician Joseph Ignace Guillotine proposed a standard method of execution to ensure that the deed was done humanely and consistently. It wasn't fair that some nobles experienced a fast and painless death while the lower classes were tortured. So it was decided that every criminal sentenced to death would be beheaded. A committee was formed and created a design for what we know today as the guillotine. The French Revolution began in 1789. By 1792, the guillotine was being used to kill on a massive scale. When the revolution finally ended in 1794, almost 17,000 had been executed with this deadly device. Accounts of executions using the guillotine do not focus on physical pain. Rather, the psychological suffering of the victims appears to be the main event. When the device is triggered, the condemned appear to die quickly at least. During the reign of Napoleon, Italy was briefly annexed by France. In 1813, the guillotine was used to execute 2 criminals in Rome. A French colonel provided the following account of that event. A dark, dismal, cloudy day in January 1813 was appointed for the execution of Venturi, and at the same time was also executed a Roman gendarme who, in a fit of jealousy, had killed with his saber a beautiful girl, who served as a model to students in painting and sculpture. Not a word was uttered, save a low murmuring sound when the 2 sufferers were seen advancing, each supported by a priest on either side, who recited prayers that were repeated by the dying man. The gendarme walked with a firm and quiet air, but Venturi was with difficulty supported by those who were endeavoring to console him. The former was executed first and uttered not a word or gave the least sign of fear or agitation. Venturi kept screaming out, "Gesu, Gesu, Gesu," until the falling knife cut short his last pious ejaculations. The head remains in a kind of wire receptacle on a level with the neck hole in the stocks. The executioner immediately seized it by the hair and, placing it on a wooden platter containing sawdust and a large sponge, held it up in exhibition all around the scaffold. I distinctly saw the eyes make 2 violent rolling movements, then fix forever. The bodies, upon being deprived of the heads, made only one considerable motion, which was, from a kneeling bent-down position, the legs and thighs stretch out behind so as to place them in a straight line on their faces. The coffins being placed underneath the scaffold, the bodies were let down into them through a trapdoor. The jet of blood was prevented from flying over the pavement by being caught in a receptacle, which conducted it into a vessel out of view. Thus ended the affair of Venturi. What can we learn from this account? mainly not to eat lunch before reading one of these episodes. The struggle is real. As far as killing criminals in a fast and efficient manner was concerned, the guillotine was a complete success. In the 20th century, Nazi Germany would find the technology too tempting to ignore. Modern efficiency. Nazi Germany experimented with almost every method of execution. They needed to kill a lot of people, and for reasons we still don't completely understand, they wanted to do it quickly. The guillotine provided a perfect opportunity to meet that goal, but the way it was handled in other European countries was far too inefficient. In order to kill large numbers of people quickly, the process had to be streamlined. Johann Reichardt was born into a family of executioners. He continued the family tradition and took his job seriously, and when the Nazis asked him to kill more people in less time, he rose to the challenge. As far as Johann was concerned, it was a waste of time putting a blindfold on the condemned, and putting the person to be executed into restraints was also too time-consuming. All Johann needed to improve his kill ratio was the help of 3 assistants. 2 people would hold the victim's arms so that he or she could not escape. As the person was lowered into position with the head beneath the blade, another assistant would place his hands over the person's eyes. Johann's theory was that making the process less stressful for the victim would also cause it to happen faster. With this new method, he claimed to be able to kill a person every 3 to 4 seconds. Nazi Germany tended to use other methods of execution for groups of people it wanted to eliminate. For instance, gas chambers were used against Jewish victims. Lethal injection was used to kill handicapped children. But when Germany needed to kill one of its own, the method of choice was the guillotine. In 1943, there was resistance to Nazi cruelty within Germany. The White Rose movement created peaceful opposition and distributed leaflets to universities. Sophie Scholl was 21 years old and was one of the leaders of this movement. On February 22nd, she was arrested along with her brother Hans and their friend Christoph Probst. They were quickly given a trial and were found guilty. Just 3 hours later, they were taken across a yard to a small building. Sophie was the first to go and supposedly walked proudly to her execution. Before she was strapped to the device, she was allowed to utter her last words. How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there is hardly anyone willing to give himself up individually to a righteous cause? Such a fine sunny day, and I have to go. But what does my death matter if through us thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action? Moments later, her bloody head was in a basket. Johann Reichardt said Sophie was the bravest person he ever executed. Hans and Christoph joined Sophie less than an hour later. France performed its last execution with the guillotine on September 10, 1977. Hamida Jandoubi was a Tunisian immigrant. He was convicted of killing a woman and was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, there was no struggle. He calmly walked to the courtyard while smoking a cigarette. He was offered a drink of rum. Then he was roughly thrown on the board that held his body as his neck was placed beneath the blade. Seconds later, his head was gone. He was the last person to be executed in France. Beheading is no longer used to execute prisoners in most of the world. It still exists in some countries, such as Iran and Saudi Arabia, where religious texts state that beheading is the proper punishment for certain crimes. Rapists and murderers in these countries meet their end much like those in the ancient world. A sword is used to sever their heads. Beheading is also used by drug cartels and terrorists. The drug cartels have been known to decapitate people with chainsaws and machetes. Most terrorists seem to prefer swords and knives. There is no doubt that using machines to decapitate is a fast and effective way to kill, but is it really painless for the victim? Can they feel it? For most of human history, executions were a public affair. So when a prisoner's head was severed, people watched it happen, and they soon began to question whether it was really painless. During the French Revolution, executioners would often hold the head so that the crowd could see its face, and many who witnessed this claimed to see the eyes twitch or the lips move. It sure seemed like the person who was executed had several seconds of awareness before the deed was done. In 1905, a French physician named Dr. Bourreau performed an experiment on the head of an executed prisoner. He gave the following description of what he saw when prisoner Henri Languille was killed. Here then is what I was able to note immediately after the decapitation. The eyelids and lips of the guillotined man worked in irregularly rhythmic contractions for about 5 or 6 seconds. This phenomenon has been remarked by all those finding themselves in the same conditions as myself for observing what happens after the severing of the neck. I waited for several seconds. The spasmodic movements ceased. It was then that I called in a strong, sharp voice, "Languille!" I saw the eyelids slowly lift up without any spasmodic contractions. I insist advisedly on this peculiarity, but with an even movement, quite distinct and normal, such as happens in everyday life, with people awakened or torn from their thoughts. Next, Languille's eyes very definitely fixed themselves on mine, and the pupils focused themselves. I was not then dealing with the sort of vague, dull look without any expression that can be observed any day in dying people to whom one speaks. I was dealing with undeniably living eyes which were looking at me. After several seconds, the eyelids closed again. It was at that point that I called out again, and once more, without any spasm, slowly the eyelids lifted, and undeniably living eyes fixed themselves on mine with perhaps even more penetration than the first time. Then there was a further closing of the eyelids, but now less complete. I attempted the effect of a third call, but there was no further movement, and the eyes took on the glazed look which they have in the dead. And there goes lunch again. The doctor certainly thought that severed heads survived for several seconds. In 2011, Dutch researchers decided to try and answer the question more definitively. The scientists attached monitoring equipment to the brains of rats. Then they decapitated the rats and observed what happened. For about 4 seconds after the head was cut off, the brain produced waves that are indicative of conscious awareness. At around 3 seconds, there was a wave of activity in the brain that would normally be associated with pain. Did the rats feel the pain of being decapitated before they lost consciousness? Nobody knows for sure. And for ethical reasons, the experiments will not be reproduced on humans. Or so we hope anyway. Despite the best efforts of modern science, we still don't know for sure whether victims of decapitation suffer. It's possible that severed heads remain conscious for a few seconds. Whether or not they feel pain will remain an unanswered question for now. Most methods of execution are intended to provide a quick and merciful end, but the incompetence of executioners results in the exact opposite happening. Gas chambers, electric chairs, and even lethal injection can take several agonizing minutes to kill their victims. That isn't the case with beheading. Whether it hurts or not, it's all over in just a few seconds. What do you think? Do severed heads know what's going on? If you enjoyed this episode, then do us a favor and hit the like button. And consider subscribing if you want to learn more horrible history in the future. Without your constant approval, we too could become severed heads. Is it a good time to mention we have a Patreon page? Look for the link in our video description should you like to contribute more than your time. And as always, thank you for watching Bad Things in History.